The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome back to Retro Rangers in the Zone. This is part 2 of an interview with George Grimm and Stan Fischler. Enjoy.
I'm curious. And I finally found out, I later found out, because when we had the ceremony, the program listed all the people who were on who vote. So I knew some of the people. I knew Doc Emmerich, for example. I knew Frank Brown, who was an intern of mine, actually. And I did get, I actually, after many, many months, I did get Dave to admit that Frank Brown was at least behind it. So that was, and of course Frank was there at the induction, which made it even great. So it was a wonderful experience, and my son from Portland and the family came over because it was in Denver, so my daughter-in-law had relatives in Denver. So it was nice, and I had a whole table. I had 9 friends at the table, plus, one of them, actually I had a few of my interns came over, former interns. Jessica Berman, who just got the gig, she's running now the women's soccer. She came all the way. And a couple of the guys really came, I have to say anybody who came from my table came from out of the way, apart from family, because it meant something to them.
That's good. That's good.
That was it.
It should. Okay, what about the Hockey Hall of Fame? I think most listeners are going to be surprised to find out that you are not in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I always thought you were, because I think in 2010 you were given the Lester Patrick Award, and I kind of assumed that you were in the Hockey Hall of Fame, but you're not. Any reason why?
Well, my joke answer is, George, what's the rush?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my joke answer. My candid answer is I don't know.
Okay.
What I do know is that a couple of guys you may know from New York journalism or from Hockey Journal, Alan Crater, who's been writing for the Times and was with AP for years, and who was a former intern of mine, and Tommy Murray, who was my editor at the Hockey News for many years. Unlike the U.S. thing, they said they're going to apply, make an application, and nominate me, which they did. And they had a pretty substantial group of people to support it. Guys like John Davidson, people who are known in the business. And I think, because they did it twice, I think in one of them, so I never pursued this.
Okay.
I didn't really pursue it, but I think that I came in second to Larry Brooks.
Okay.
That's what I was. When Larry Brooks went. Okay. But they tried it a second time. Very, very. They collected a bunch, and I didn't make it. I think I was down the list. So the second guy, Tommy Murray, he's a fiery guy, Tommy, and he was furious. So he called up the guy who was in charge of this thing, of the writers, and he gave him, he blasted him, and what he did is he found out some of the names. See, they keep the names secret. See, the USA Hockey Hall of Fame, you got a whole list of the names, and these are all the people on the committee, okay?
Right.
With this group, they wouldn't tell him. The people who voted were kept secret. Now, I don't know how Tommy Murray found out who was blah, blah, blah. And he did get to Bob McKenzie, And the answer that Bob McKenzie, he said, well, how come Fisher's not getting? And Bob McKenzie's answer was, well, he's a polarizing figure. So, well, if that's a good reason to keep me out, so whatever. But I've never made a big deal about it. I've never written anything about it, ever. Never did, never will. And, hey, they don't want me in, then I'm not in. They don't think I'm qualified, then I'm not qualified.
Wow.
So, what's the big deal? If I come to see you and I get on the subway with my Metro card, they don't ask me, are you in the Hockey Hall of Fame? I get in. Right. I get my subway ride whether I'm a member of the Hall of Fame or not. And that's it. There's no, that's the candid reply from top to bottom.
Okay. Speaking of the Lester Patrick Award, I have a picture on my wall that I got from Janet Halligan of you, John Halligan, with the Lester Patrick Awards, and Cammie Granado and Brian Leach. And I got that from Janet, and I got it hanging up here. I just happened to see it. What about Women's History Month is this month. Why don't you tell us about how your late wife Shirley broke down some really major barriers in the garden press box?
You wrote me a note about, has this been all a bunch of fun? And I wrote back, no. I just wrote back, no. I had a lot of battles. George. After Frank Boucher got canned, I was very curious the fact that he was, and I was not happy with the fact that, well, Muzz Patrick I didn't mind because Muzz was coach when I worked for the team, and he's a pretty good guy, at least then. And but I had a lot of battles because I said what I felt, or I wrote what I felt, and Phil Watson and I had a huge battle. It was a running battle until he got fired. And I had a lot of trouble with him. I had a lot of trouble with people who got angry at stuff that I wrote. Bill Jennings got me fired from the Hockey News.
Wow.
And because he didn't like, Bill Jennings was it was a power program. He was one of the big guys. And he made it very clear that, well, of course, Ken McKenzie owned the Hockey News then, and I did a lot of good stuff, and Ken and I actually were friends. In fact, Ken's wife was furious. Ken's wife was a wonderful gal. She was furious that he didn't back me, you see.
Okay.
But as they say, it was a business decision. He didn't want to get Bill Jennings mad. Well, later on, ironically, I became Jennings' confidant. We became the best of friends, and he would call me about different guys, and I had a problem with Rick Middleton, and I had a problem with Sanderson. I can remember, he'd be up in the country, call me up, what should I do? But that was earlier when he got me canned. It turned out to be a blessing because it went right over to the Sporting News, and I wound up with a bigger audience, a different audience. But I was very, very upset. Now, later on, I don't know if you know the story or not, but later on, I was writing stuff critical, and Patrick Muzz was making a mess of the team.
Yes.
And this was early in the season. It was a loss, and the fans were chanting, Muzz must go. I was on the beat. I succeeded Dave Anderson. Dave Anderson moved to the Times, and I moved up into, was with the Journal American. It's a Hearst paper, largest circulation of any evening paper in the city. We beat out the Post by a ton, at the World Telegram. It was a big deal. So I wrote the game story, and then I wrote the sidebar. And in the sidebar, I mentioned the fans were chanting Muzz must go. He went bananas. And I get a call from Halligan the next day. He said, I'm sorry to say, but you're going to be banned from this. You're going to be banned from the press box. You're going to be banned, blah, 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 because of what I wrote. Oh, this was a make or break thing for me.
Yeah.
Still very young. Still, is on the beat. So I had to go to my editor, Max Case, the editor, the sports editor. And, Max could easily have said, well, you don't need this nonsense. You'll be covering high school basketball or something like that. He didn't have to support me. He had other people who could have covered, not that they would be as passionate.
Right.
So Max calls me into his office, and he says, I just called up Irving Mitchell Felt, who was the head of the Garden. He says, I want to know, I just called up Irving Mitchell Felt, and I told him that if you don't rescind the ban, there's not going to be another word about the Rangers in the New York Journal American. How's that for support?
Yeah.
And within 10 minutes, Irving Mitchell Felt called back and say, Fischler has access to everything, forget about it. So that was a turning point.
Right.
It was a turning point. But if you take the feuds I had with Watson, when he almost threw me off a train coming out of Boston,
Right.
he was furious, and you take this the anguish, then I had the whole thing with Muzz, which of course is the way Cat Francis wound up getting the GM. This was not fun.
Right.
It was not fun. But starting in September '54, when I went to work for the Rangers, I haven't paid for a hockey ticket my whole life.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, what about your late wife, Shirley? She was a pioneer in the sports reporting industry.
When I met Shirley, I took a year off from journalism to do PR at New York University because my former mentor, Stan Saplin, who was the Ranger PR guy from 45 through 50, and it was a guy who put together the first yearbooks. He was a phenomenal guy.
Right.
He went to work at NYU, and I wanted to try, and the money was good. And I met Shirley at NYU in June of '67. And no, it was 60. It must have been '66. Anyhow, the whole point is we fell in love, and but she didn't know. This when we met, it was like the late spring. She didn't know it had anything to do with hockey. She didn't know as far as she was concerned, I worked for Nathan's in Coney Island. She didn't know anything about hockey. And then finally, we've been together so long, so now it's the fall. This is the beginning of expansion, '67. The Rangers played the Canadians in an exhibition at the Garden. I took her along to see the game. And by that time, she knew I was in hockey. She didn't know how deep. And she had gone to Michigan when Red Berenson played for Michigan, so she knew about the game. And what surprised me, just intuitively, she had very insightful reactions. She picked out a couple of guys on the Canadians who were actually rookies. Serge Savard and Carol Vadney.
Yeah, good eye.
And she was mentioning to me these two guys who are very impressive. They're like, wow, I was impressed that she knew. Well, Savard wound up in the Hall of Fame, and Vadney had a hell of a good career. So we wound up getting married. And once we got married, she became interested in writing. And I was doing hockey annual books called Hockey Stars of '67, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you'd like to write a couple of profiles? Go ahead. She did. And I was a very tough editor all the time. Even though I was teaching college, I was very tough. And she got angry at what I did in my editing. And she was very, very angry. I could have wound up getting divorced over that. But she learned, she studied, and she became a better writer than I was. She was very, very good. Of course, we worked, we did television together with the World Hockey, 73, 74. We were actually the first husband and wife to do hockey TV. But she was very, when she got the assignment to cover the Ranger Leafs playoff, and they wouldn't let her in the press box, she was stunned.
Sure.
She had to sit somewhere up in the Blues with a typewriter on her lap and the notes under her ass, and it was crazy. So she said to me, well, what should I do? I said, there's only one thing to do. You got to go to the Human Rights Commission, see what happens. That was not easy.
No.
It was not easy because once this came out that she was challenging them, every single guy among the writers was against her, which meant they were against me.
Right.
And only one guy stood up for her, Neil Alford, who was a young guy writing for the Post, and he did a nice column for her. But we went to the commission, and the cat was on one side, Halligan was on the other side, and well, she won. She got in, and but again, she was never one to publicize it. She could have been a good story. No, it's done. Bye-bye. She was in. She did her stuff, and that was the end of it. So, but she was very, very good. She pulled me out of a gym. I was ghosting Derek Sanderson's book, and I'm very mechanically awful. And something went wrong with the tape recorder that I needed, and she fixed it for me. Then we got an assignment to do the Macmillan Encyclopedia. That was at the beginning of the internet, the computer era.
Mm-hmm.
The Macmillan Encyclopedia I use to this day. I tell you, George, it was a phenomenal thing. I'd like to say that because my name was on it, that I did much for her. I did very little. She carried the ball on.
Wow.
She was up in the NHL office when it was in Montreal, looking up statistics. They were so backward there. They had statistics on pieces of cardboard. It was a joke, but she busted her ass, and she made that thing possible. So she was. I have to say that she had as much right to be inducted into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame as I was, and they could do something. This is International Women's Month, but I wrote a note to one of the guys, and I'm going to tell it to Jessica Bring when I see it. Jessica knew damn well how good Shirley was and how much Shirley did. There's been very little support, but you know what? Who cares?
Yeah.
I know what she did. I have no compunctions about telling you that she did 90% of the work on the encyclopedia, but I got 50% of the byline.
Yeah.
But she did a lot, and she did stuff on her own.
Right. Well, that's my go-to book now. I mean, as I look up players, because this book I'm working on now, I'm writing profiles on some of the players, and I always go to your book first to see what you wrote about them, and then I go to other places. But that's my go-to book first. So.
We were season ticket holders also for the Rangers, which was more a businessman, and she was more passionate than I was about aspects of the game. She hated Johnny Ferguson. Hated Johnny Ferguson. We got assigned to do a book called Up from the Minor Leagues of Hockey, and it involved interviewing guys who made it to the NHL, but talking about how it was in the minors. For example, Jean Rattel was in the book. There's Pinkley, guys like that, and Fergie was somebody that had to be in the book because he really busted his ass in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And, finally made it to the Canadians. So now, I sent a note to Fergie because I knew Fergie. I knew Fergie because my best friend, the Rangers, best friend was Aldo Whittleman, and Aldo wound up on Cleveland, a teammate of Fergie. Whenever they play in Springfield, I go see my buddy Aldo. I'm sitting having lunch with the Cleveland Barons in this restaurant in Springfield, and I'm sitting with Aldo in the booth, and all of a sudden this.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.